Alright, g'day guys, welcome to Season 1, Episode 1 of Snap Addict. Essentially today we're going to be going over action sports photography at a skate park. Now, we're going to keep it really simple today. Obviously a lot of you guys have DSLRs, so we're going to keep it nice and basic. We're going to be using one camera, one lens, and shooting with available light. In the future episodes, in the next couple of episodes for this season, we will be going over high-speed sync, including strobes, low-light photography, you know, all those kind of areas where it comes down to a little bit more in depth with stills photography. But today, as I said, we're keeping it nice and simple. We're going to be using a Nikon kit today, so we're going to be using basically a very simple DSLR, the D7000, and also a pro-level DSLR, which is a D3S. We'll also be going over the difference between pro glass and kit lenses. So we've got the 24-70 2.8, the 14-24 2.8, which are pro lenses, and then we've got some entry-level glass, which is the 50mm 1.8 and the 55-200 variable lens. So the good thing about the difference between those is you can see the difference between pro glass and cheap glass. Today we've luckily had Jackson Bartlett from Mag Gear Pro come along. He's going to be our test subject for today. So let's jump on into it and we'll go over some techniques and hopefully you guys will learn something. See you in a bit. Alright, so we're here today in Macquarie Field Skate Park in Sydney, and as mentioned before, we're going to go over action sports photography at a skate park. We're going to be going over some basic lenses, some basic cameras, some more pro glass, and just to give you an idea of what we're shooting with. Today we're using a Nikon kit for stills, and for the video kit in a future episode we're going to be using all Canon equipment. So let's quickly go over some of the lenses we're going to be using today. So I'll start off quickly with a 50mm 1.8 lens. It's a very cheap lens, about 120 bucks. Very versatile, anyone can pick it up. Great thing about it is it's very sharp and it's a 1.8, so it's great in low light. Another kit lens is a 55-300. It's a variable aperture lens, so it's got a good reach on it. It is a DX lens, but as soon as you start to get low light situations, it's not really all that great. But in a situation like this, absolutely fine. Another fixed lens, which is a bit more of a pro bit of glass, is an 85 1.8. Mainly classed as a portraiture lens because 85 is a really great length for portraiture work, but for the skate park works great as well. It's got a really quick focusing system as well. Yeah, so again, that's a fixed lens. Moving up, we've got the 24-70 2.8, so this is a fixed 2.8 aperture, really quick, really fast. Probably one of the best lenses to have in anyone's kit. The range between 24-70 is fantastic for wide angle stuff and almost telephoto or mid-range, so that's a great lens. Comes with a bit of a price though, and going a bit wider, mainly for action sports, we're going to be using the 14-24 a lot to get that really impactful style of, you know, showing how big things are actually going. So again, 14-24, this is a fixed 2.8, but Samyang, Tamron, Sigma, they all do quite a pretty wide range like this. So those are the lenses. Quickly we'll go, this will be the pro level DSLR that we're using today. This is a D3S. Really great sports camera. It's got fantastic in low light situations. So a big thing for low light is looking for a DSLR that has a good native ISO range. So anywhere from 200 to 6400, you're in the right ballpark. About 11 frames a second as well. So for sequences, sports stuff, fantastic. Also the D7000. So this is for Canon shooters. This is very closely related to the 60D. Great camera as well. You know, you're looking to pick these up. These are a really good mark. So we're shooting that as well, and we'll go over some more specs a little bit later. So let's get into it. All right, guys. So one thing that I think is really important with action sports photography, or for that matter, any area of photography, is to really know your sport and know your genre, know what you're shooting before you get into it. Luckily for my situation, the main reason we've chose this is because myself and Nick, our background comes from action sports, so we've been involved for about the last 10 years or so. So we've got a good understanding of you know, what the sport's all about, certain times to take the shots, certain areas, certain compositions. I think that all really comes into play when you want to execute a perfect photograph. You know, aside camera settings, anything like that, knowing your sport is a really, really important thing when it comes down to photography. For instance, if I was shooting a golf tournament, I wouldn't know anything about it, I wouldn't know where to shoot, I wouldn't know who to be shooting, so I'd have to do a lot of research before I actually am comfortable to go out there and shoot a golf tournament. So what we're going to do for our first shot, we're actually going to implement quite a fast-paced shot. So we're going to get Jackson Bartlett from Mag Gear to be doing a backboard down the handrail. So I think it's about 9 stairs or so. So the hardest thing about this is making sure we've got the right shutter speed to be able to freeze the action. So if we're shooting too slow with our shutter speeds, we're going to get pretty much a blurry image, or what's called motion blur. So what we'll do is we'll quickly go over some camera settings. On a perfect day like this, there's a lot of light. We're not going to have any worries about low light shooting, so I can keep my ISO as low as possible. So for instance, on the D7000 I'm shooting at ISO 100. That's because there's more than enough light to be able to get the correct speed that I want. So for instance, I'm going to be shooting at about 1/1000th of a second. The reason for that is I believe any sort of motion, so whether it's vehicles, sports, people running, athletes, to get the frozen shot you need to be at least 1/1000th of a second. And reason for that is that's a quick enough shutter speed to be able to completely freeze your action. Even if you're shooting at about 1/250th of a second, sometimes you'll notice that you can have a blurry image when items are moving very fast. A lot of car sports photographers will go out there, they try to aim for about 1/2000th of a second to ensure that they've got a frozen image. So because Jackson's going to be moving quite quickly, hitting that rail quite fast, 1/1000th of a second is the mark that I'm aiming for. Being on a bright day like this, no problems at all. If it was low light, I'd really have to push my ISO to be able to get to that sort of shutter speed. Problem with that, higher ISO means a lower quality image. So luckily with digital cameras we can really push it these days. Film is a lot harder. But anyway, let's get to it. So we'll get Jackson jumping up, and firstly we're going to be going over a telephoto shot. So what we're going to be looking at is shooting at around 300 mils. So we've got a 55 to 300 kit lens on the D7000, shooting at 300 mils, and then we're going to switch over to a 14mm lens and show you the difference between a telephoto to a wide angle shot. I think you'll notice that the wide angle shot for this style of sports is going to be really impactful. Alright, so let's shoot at 300mm. I'll go over the settings in the next segment. See you then. So what we're going to do is we're going to get Jackson to come down and do his backboard straight down the rail. Quickly going over camera settings, again, nice, lot of light. We're getting one or 1,000th of a second, 1,500th of a second quite easily, and that's wide open, so that's shooting at 4.5. ISO right down at 100 because we don't need any higher than that. Quickly going over kit lenses, the great in this sort of situation where they fail is their focusing systems are quite slow. That's where you really start to notice that you want to invest in some better glass for quicker focusing systems. So instead of shooting in continuous high, basically that's taking a lot of shots, which is like a rapid fire. Some photographers refer to it as spray and pray, where you just take a lot of photographs and hope that you get the right one. I'm going to be shooting in single shots, so I'm not going to be taking 10 shots a second. I'm going to take one photograph and hopefully I get the right one. I think that's a good way to really muscle memory and train your style of photography to get that one shot, not just shoot a bunch of photographs and hope that you get it. So what we'll do, again, shooting at 1/1000th per second, 4.5, ISO 100. We are shooting in RAW. I'll go over RAW and JPEG a little bit later on, but we're shooting in RAW, so we've got a lot more flexibility. Yeah, so let's grab the shot. I'll get Jackson to run off now. Yep, cool. So that was shot at 300mm. I'm on a telephoto lens, and yeah, you'll see this result that comes up on screen. Let's jump over there and let's do a wide angle shot, and you'll see the difference between the two. Alright guys, so as you saw that first photograph, that was shot at a pretty long focal length. That was around 200, 300 or so. For this particular handrail, it's not really the best way to be shooting it. I think for this handrail, we're going to get a better exposure if we're up nice and close. And what we need to do now is throw on a wider lens. So we've jumped over to an FX camera, which is a full frame, and we're also throwing on a 14mm lens, a 14 to 24. We're going to be shooting at 14mm because I think for this style of shot, we're going to really want to accentuate, how high he's in the air, the style of the handrail it is, and yeah, I think we'll get a better shot at 14mm. So alright, so what we'll do is we'll get Jackson to line it up again, and again we're shooting at about, because it's a little bit brighter at the moment, we're shooting at about 2,000th of a second at 2.8, so that should look pretty cool. Alright, let's see what we get. Alright, whenever you're ready. So what I've done there is, because I'm actually in aperture priority at the moment, the camera's metering for the sky. Now what that's essentially going to do is give me a silhouette Jackson, as you can see on the screen here. Now I don't necessarily want that. The sky doesn't need to be pitch blue. We can pull that back in post. So what I'm going to do is jump over into manual and change my settings adjustably. So let's go over into manual, and I'm going to dial up to 12/50th of a second at 2.8. So what that's going to do, it's going to give me a bit of a brighter image. The sky is not going to be just as blue, but it's actually going to give me a better exposure on Jackson. So we'll get him to do that again, and you'll see the difference between these two images. Cool, so as you can see on the screen there, by adjusting my shutter speed, slowing that down, I'm still well above 1/1000th of a second. It's giving me a better exposed image. Admittedly, in the previous image, we could have boosted that up 2 stops or so in post-production, but I think if you can get it closer in camera, then you're going to have a way better image. Alright, perfect. What we'll do is we'll cut this here, and we'll head off to the next section. Alright guys, so reverting back to what we mentioned before, knowing your sport is a big part of getting the right photograph. So as you'll see, I'm going to take 2 photographs here. One's going to be incorrectly timed, the next one's going to be spot on, and I think you really notice the difference between the two. One's going to show a complete extension of Jackson doing a Superman deck grab, and you'll see the difference between the wrong photo and the right photo. Settings in this, again, we're shooting quite quick, 1/1000th of a second, shooting at f4 and ISO 100 because there's plenty of light. Alright, cool, so we'll get Jackson lined up and we'll get this on the way. Alright, whenever you're ready. So as you guys will see in that photograph that's on screen now, it's completely mistimed. I shot it probably a second or so before. So knowing your sport, knowing when the extension is going to be, knowing what tricks to photograph is really important. So what we'll do is we'll get Jackson doing the same one right again, and I'll get this at the correct timing. And as you'll see in that photograph, his legs are a pure extension. They're off to the side a little bit, but we're talking more about, you know, the correct time to take the photograph. Yep, so let's go on to the next segment. Alright, so what we wanted to go over now is shooting at different apertures. Now, again, on a really bright day like this, you can pretty much use whatever aperture you want. If you want to be shooting wide open at, you know, 1.2, 1.4, 2.8, or you can shoot closed down all the way down to f10, 16, 22. Really depends on what sort of photograph you're after. With shooting wide open, what you get is shallow depth of field, which is the background drops out of focus depending on your lens, your focal length, and your subject and distance to camera. Shooting at apertures like f10, f16, you're usually going to get a much greater depth of field. So not necessarily what you want for every photograph, but yeah, we'll show you the difference here of what shooting wide open to shooting closed down looks like. All right, whenever you're ready. Yeah. And so that was shooting at 2.8, and as you can see in that photograph on screen, things are pretty milky, the background's quite blurry, and Jackson's quite sharp. Now what you've got to be careful with shooting wide open is focus is quite difficult sometimes, you know, you've got to be really accurate. So we're going to close down to, let's say, f11, and we'll show you the difference between 2.8 and f11. Right, whenever you're ready. Yeah. Cool. Now you can see with that photograph, that's shooting at f11, so the aperture has become quite small, and that's therefore increased your depth of field, so things have become much more in focus. Generally, when you're doing a lot of portraiture work, landscape work, you try to shoot at about that aperture because you get quite a sharp shot. Yeah, so those are the differences with shooting closed down, shooting wide open. We're going to go much more in depth on this topic because shooting at different apertures is a very in-depth topic, but this was just a starter tee, so alright, we'll move on to the next segment. Alright guys, so as we briefly mentioned before, shutter speeds are very important when it comes into sports photography. If you want to do sports with quick motion, cars, scooters, BMX, racing, anything like that, you need to be at a decent shutter speed. So most photographers will aim for 1/1000th of a second. That's generally the safe spot. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you the difference between shooting at 1/1000th of a second and shooting at 15th, 20th, 60th of a second. You'll see that you get the implementation of motion blur, which can, sometimes if that's what you're going for, that's cool, but a lot of time in sports you want to get a tack sharp photograph, and this will be showing you the difference of what they look like. So we're going to be shooting at 1/1000th exactly at f2.8, and then we're going to close down to f22 to be able to get the shutter speed down low enough and show you the difference. Alright, so Jackson is going to be doing a flare on this quarter. This is a frozen photograph at 1/8000th of a second, and you'll be able to see the difference. Alright, whenever you're ready. So as you can see in that photograph, that's nice and frozen, and what we're going to do is we're going to close our aperture right down to f22, and we're getting a metered speed of 15th of a second. So that's going to introduce some motion blur because Jackson's actually spinning it at a a fairly accelerated rate. All right, whenever you're ready, we'll go again. Cool. So as you can see, guys, Jackson's almost non-defined in that photograph. You can't tell what's going on, it just looks like some sort of a blurry thing that's being spun around. So that's where you need to make the crucial decision on what shutter speed you're going to want to be shooting at. You need to make the decision on the correct ISOs, the correct aperture values, and the correct shutter speed to get the photograph that you want. So we're going to go into much more detail with all of these topics. So that's it for episode 1, season 1, action sports photography at a skate park with a camera, lens, and available light. We've got a lot more coming up with this sort of topic. Hope to see you soon. Thanks again from Snap Addict, myself and Nick. We'll see you soon.